Huxton Creepers were pretty much a band of schoolmates, weren't they?
Yeah, we all sort of went to school together, and basically I was doing a bit of kind of songwriting with Paul Thomas, the lead guitarist, and yeah, we sort of knew that Archie played some drums, and we caught up, and Matt Eddy, we didn't know played bass, but he said, I'll learn, so he sort of taught himself, and so we started up as, really kind of rank amateurs. Paul was a well-trained musician. He played double bass and could play with a bow as well as just plucking, and so he was pretty good. I was just a hack on chords, and so yeah, we sort of came together, but the band didn't really come together until after the first year after high school.
Right.
So we knew each other, and Paul and I were interested in getting a band together, but the band didn't really come together until that first year out of high school when we started to rehearse, and we got together and we played a whole lot of Saints songs that we liked. So that was our very first start, playing some songs by the Saints.
Ah, so you're a Saints cover band to begin with.
Wow. Yeah, well, we had to learn something to start off with. Although I did play with Paul, and in high school we did a few soul tunes, and things like 6, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and Land of a Thousand Dances and stuff like that. So there was a little wee touch of soul at the very start in high school. So yeah, funny.
So were you a ambitious group of young lads, or was it just really much for fun in those early days?
Oh no, we were just just wanted to have fun and play, and if we got a gig, that was a bonus. And I think our first gig was at my brother's 21st, and then soon after we managed to score a gig at a place called the Venetian Room in Lonsdale Street, and Matthew Eddy's brother mixed us. We played to a grand total of about 5 or 6 people, or maybe 10 if we were lucky, and so that was our first gig was, 21st, and our second one was, a proper gig was at the Venetian Room. But not really, but I guess as a young person, you always harbour, you're gonna have these dreams of being able to sort of make some kind of dent in the music scene in some way. So it's rare, but it was never we never discussed, let's get together, let's become the best band we can be, and let's turn down the world scenario. For us, it was, let's have some fun, get into the garage, drink some beer, enjoy each other's company, and play some songs that we, hopefully enjoy. Simple as that, really.
Yeah, well, if they were your ambitions, you were a raging success.
Well, yeah, on that level, yeah. So, we didn't really, but I guess, as soon as things got a bit serious, I guess, things were commensurate with how you, what you're experiencing at the time. And so, each time you go, well, it'd be nice if we could sort of take a step further, reach more people, play more interesting and larger gigs and so forth. So, but initially it was never really that sort of inspired or constructed or conceived plan. With some bands can have it. This is our strategy for world domination. But for us, our strategy for world domination was more about enjoying each other's company and the ancillary activities that happen after a gig. So.
It's well documented the band name came from a character in a Sherlock Holmes movie. Were there any other candidates for the band name?
Oh, gee, not that I can remember, but we actually got it wrong because the character was the Huxton Creeper,
That's
not
right.
the Huxton. So we got that wrong too. But other candidates for the name, I can't remember any, and if there were, they probably were as horrible as any other band name that people spend time trying to find. The hardest thing in rock and roll.
Yeah.
How do I find a good band name?
That's
and
true.
we didn't say that would be good, we just said that'll do.
It was a real thriving live music scene here in Melbourne at the time the band was around. Was there a sense of competition among the bands, or was it more a sense of community?
Look, I would say a bit of both. I would say more a sense of community, though. It was really it was a really thriving time. It reminds me a little bit. I sort of watched my daughter play. She's in a band called Porpoise Spit, and and there's a nice sort of pub scene that's really kind of thriving in the north of Melbourne now, which is great. And it reminds me a bit of what was happening in the 80s. You know, lots of little venues, some mid-sized venues, and good crowds. I mean, for us, we were lucky because of that strip in St Kilda of the CD Ballroom and the Prince of Wales. They had a free night on Thursdays, and if you're lucky enough to get into that, you're playing to a ready-made crowd. So people are there just to hang and enjoy themselves. And if the band is good and you can cut it and they like you, therefore you had opportunity of drawing some kind of base that'll follow you in the future. So that was kind of, I reckon, the start of it, was playing those free gigs at the Prince of Wales, and especially the CD Ballroom as well. So yeah, it was a good time. We always wanted to sort of, I think every band likes to sort of, you know, show their wares and say, okay, well, we can entertain and blow the next band off stage if we're supporting, or hold our own. So, I mean, you know, that's always out there. But it was never, I didn't experience any, like, jealousy as such or anything like that. It was more that, you know, hey, well, if we're going to do a gig, let's do this one and let's do it really well. And, yeah, but more competitive in Sydney, I would say. It was competitive in Sydney, but not so much in Melbourne. There was a really good community sort of base of bands from playing at the Toads from the north and to, you know, to St Kilda in the south.
So did you always see yourselves as a live band first and foremost, and the recording was just a secondary thing?
Yes, I would say so, definitely. And you know, recording was the dark magic. It was this whole other kind of world that our first thing we ever did was a 4-track recording at our mixer. Craig MacArthur had a little 4-track recorder, and we, you know, literally mixed on that for our first little demo that we made. So, but we always saw ourselves as a live band, and which was interesting, because when we actually got to record our first album properly, we were really set up in that typical 80s production method of separation, where you get the drums down and you have the guide track you're playing along with someone on guitar or bass maybe, and then you go and redo your bass and guitars and all that sort of stuff, and it's kind of step by step, which was a shame, because I think we kind of, as a band, would have benefited from getting into the studio, record the thing essentially live, and then overdub what you need to do afterwards. So that was kind of a bit of a disappointment when it came to recording, because, as you asked, I think that we were essentially a live band, and that's where we kind of found our spirit and our kind of joie de vivre. You know, we sort of enjoyed that, talking to the audience, a bit of camaraderie between each other and the audience, and that kind of sense of energy and recklessness. Like in live, you can be a little bit reckless and don't worry about being perfect and just get the energy out there. And I think that's what we missed on the recordings a bit. So, but that's 80s production.
Yeah. Well, that first album, I pulled it out last night and played it, and I still pull it out from time to time. There was some great, real well-crafted pop songs on there with great commercial potential. Did you have high hopes for that album when it came out?
Oh, yeah. You know, we did. We thought sort of like there were some songs on the first album that, you know, we were sort of, they put out My Cherie and More, and we're like, okay, that's fine. But I was sort of hoping that I Will Persuade You would have kind of hit the mark a bit further, but it just didn't for whatever reason or whatever, you know, circumstances are around it. Those tracks just didn't pop through, and the same with Autumn Leaves. We're sort of hoping that might sort of grab radio a bit. But I think we were sort of stuck in between this kind of twilight zone of maybe not quite commercial enough for your Triple M's, and also probably not quite indie enough to be kind of, I guess, you know, like the Triple R darlings. But we did play a lot. Triple R did play us a lot, and they were very supportive. So, I don't know. I think it was that sort of thing. But, yeah, we did have hopes that would take, and our hopes were sort of slowly dashed, essentially. You know, it was kind of like, oh, we're not getting much airplay. Oh, well, back to the drawing board. So, and we toured a lot. But it was a long time before that album came out, because that album came out in 1986, and really we'd started since about 1981, 82. So it was about sort of 3 or 4 years before we got an album under our belt. And so, yeah, it was interesting. It's sort of like if we probably got in earlier and recorded something quicker, then maybe it would have been a different scenario. But, who knows?
Mm. So how did you have Steve Berlin involved in the production of that?
Well, we were on a label with the Gurus called Big Time Records, and that was set up by a guy called Fred Vestal, who made all his money through Air Supply, but weirdly enough was very much into kind of indie music in the States and in Australia. So he had the Slash label and other things, and Los Lobos were also on Big Time as well through the Slash label. And they were touring, and we supported them a few times, and basically the record company came up and said, Steve, would you be interested in, he was interested in doing production work, and he came in. And the interesting thing was, though, was he only had 10 days, and we had like about, so he recorded bits and pieces of that first album, but he never recorded like a complete track as such, so it was a shame, because I actually would have really liked to have finished off the album with Steve, because he had a bit more of an organic approach, and then they got Ian McKenzie, the Platinum Studios engineer, to basically spend the last 4 weeks and mix it all together, and that's where a few more of the perhaps bombastic 80s kind of production values came into play. So it was a real shame in the end, because I liked what Steve was doing. He was pretty ruthless, and he was pretty pushy, but he was great. Yeah, I remember he said to us once when we came out to a gig at Latote, and he was saying, "Oh, you guys are good, but you ain't wolves yet." So I think he understood where we were coming from in the live way, and I think that's why he was quite disappointed when he got the recorded version. I mean, there's some good aspects about the polish, and there's bad aspects about it, but I think he was a bit disappointed. He wanted something a bit more organic, and I would agree. So, it was a shame we couldn't have completed it with him. So he only had the 10 days when he was out in the country. So it would have been interesting if he'd just finished like 3 or 4, 3 tracks, and to compare them against other recording sort of, processes. So, yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag, actually, over the sort of 2 months that we made the album. So, yeah, and 2 very different approaches from Steve Berlin to Ian McKenzie, who was, he was the go-to guy for all the, it's like all the big production from the models to that kind of stuff, maybe even Kids in the Kitchen he might have done, and that's sort of, typical 80s production of very chorus guitar sounds and the tyranny of the snare exploding on every snare beat.
Yeah, so Steve was probably the right man for the job. He just didn't get a decent crack at it.
Yeah, that's right. So it was a bit of a shame, and he was great. He was a really nice guy, and we were ecstatic to be supporting Los Lobos, let alone having someone like him produce us. So yeah.
Now the album was re-released a few years back in remastered form. Were you involved heavily in the remastering process? Yeah.
Well, sort of a friend of Mark Burchett, our old manager. He knew someone who had a good mastering studio, so we dragged out all the quarter-inch masters and other old rarities and things like that we found. So we basically compiled all the stuff that we had on the quarter-inch master analog tapes. So it's sort of 2-track quarter-inch masters. So we had to make sure that we had to bake them and all that kind of stuff, because so they didn't fall apart after we ran them through the machine once and all that kind of stuff. So tape shreds. So we did got through that, and so we were my aim and the band's aim was to, if we can, through mastering, see if we can maybe adjust some of the dynamics of the things, the mix between guitar and snare and that kind of thing. So just to see if you can push up through the sort of, frequency levels of the track, if you can kind of push that a bit. You can a little bit to a degree. But yeah, so we were involved in that just to see if we could kind of push those elements a bit. So, yeah.
Was there much in the way of overseas interest in the band?
Oh, that was a fascinating story because we did get some songs from the second album were played on college radio, and our manager went over to LA and to New York, and they were lining up a college tour, and then Big Time Records basically went bust. It was taken over by BMG. The manager of Big Time Records grabbed the Gurus and took them to BMG, and we were kind of like, you know, a consolation and the prize gets thrown in with the big prize draw of the Gurus. So we got thrown into the world of BMG, and yeah, sort of we didn't have that kind of push, that independent push coming from them. So we ended up not going, but there was, in the States, definitely, we were sort of almost lined up to tour, but it didn't happen because everything slowed down after that happened. We had to sort of renegotiate a deal with our BMG to sort of join on with them, or we were going elsewhere, so it was all a bit tricky, and really we weren't much of a priority to BMG. So we finished off our second album, but you know, and we tried to push it, but we didn't have the money and the support or the will, I think, that came with having an independent label like Big Time to drive it overseas, unfortunately. So that never eventuated. We played a lot in New Zealand, but that's about it. Yeah. You can't really consider New Zealand overseas. It's more like going to Tassie, I guess, unfortunately. But you know, that's the one thing I would have loved to have done, is to have had some sort of tour. But touring was much more. It was more expensive. It was difficult, you know, to do in those days. Unless you could just throw everything aside and just live on a shoestring on someone's floor. But you know, otherwise it was quite difficult.
Sure. How do you look back on that second album? Now, it didn't have the profile of the first, but there was still some strong material on there.
Yeah, I think there was probably, for me, there was a couple of songs I could take or leave, but I really loved Skin of My Teeth is great, and I loved This Day Is Mine and some other tracks as well. So I really liked the second album, and was recorded with the guy that did the Berries' first album and Paul Kelly's first album. Oh God, my memory is escaping me. The producer's name, an engineer's name. It's Trafalgar Studios in Sydney. Mm-hmm. And that was good. It was a bit more of an organic. We were kind of, after that process of the first album, we just wanted to get in there and record sort of basically in a kind of fairly live-ish scenario, and then just dub over what we needed to. And so that was a kind of a bit more of an enjoyable process in some ways. And we had big hopes for Skin of My Teeth, but because we'd done the cover of Pretty Flamingo, which I didn't want to do, and others they wanted to do that song. I wanted to do Victoria by the Kinks. Anyway, so long story short, the Pretty Flamingo did get in the charts, and we were hopeful, and through BMG, that they could actually get us onto the radio station, but onto some kind of commercial, airplay. But it just, again, didn't eventuate. And there was a few things, probably some of our wild behaviour at certain gigs that was a bit too chaotic. And I remember a gig where all the Sydney DJs came along to see us play once at the Manville Room. And we were on about 3 o'clock at night, and a couple of us were a little bit under the weather in a major way, so it wasn't the most the greatest of gigs. So we kind of shot ourselves in the foot a bit. So, things like that happen. You can laugh at it now, but it was probably it was just an unfortunate circumstance then. But, I don't know. Those little things conspire against you too. You have to sort of be on your game if people are coming to, the powers that be are kind of, they're courting you or you're courting them. You got to be ready. So those sorts of things probably, But I was a bit disappointed because Pretty Flamingo had sort of, it achieved its aim. It got us on commercial radio, and I thought Skin of My Teeth was a really good song, and I was really hopeful for that, and it just, didn't catch, so for whatever reason.
Now you toured with the Ramones on their Australian tour. Any standout memories of that?
Standout memory for me is watching Archie Law and Joey Ramone talk to each other. You know, both 6'6" and tall and lanky. I think that's the reason why he probably talked to Arch. They had something in common, but otherwise nothing much to communicate with. So we did talk to CJ, who was touring at the time and stuff like that. But it was, we didn't really have that much to do with them. We didn't party on with them or anything like that. They kept to themselves pretty much. But afterwards, a bit of chit-chat in the band room and that sort of thing. But it was like we were pretty ecstatic to be just supporting the Ramones. And so, we were the first out the front to watch them. Since they came out, we sort of squeezed into the front and were fans like everyone else. So, but no, that was really good fun. But I didn't really get to talk to them much. Sort of Joey and Johnny were men of little words. They kept to themselves, but Joey talked to Archie a bit. They had that high thing in common, and I think they could identify with each other there. So
yeah. So was at any point was there a defining moment when you knew that it was time to put the band to bed?
Yeah, probably after we sort of released an EP after the record company weren't going to continue on with us, and we sort of released an independent EP. At that stage, it's no one thing. We toured endlessly. There was one year, I remember we played 250 gigs in a year. That doesn't sound like a lot for 365 days of the year, but it really is a lot of gigs. And, we drove ourselves into the ground with a lot of live touring. And, it's like family, eventually you got to leave the nest. And we were all so intertwined with each other that it was, we were getting on each other's nerves. Paul was probably, I think he was getting courted by wedding parties, anything. We weren't really going anywhere with kind of getting any sort of, we could still get people to our shows, our live shows, but it was just, it was a sense of like just sort of treading water after kind of making that EP after the second album, and sort of like, where to after this, what do we do? And then basically it was sort of, okay, well, I think it's time, and Paul had the offer to join weddings parties. So, it's like, I'm not going to continue without, we are what we are. And so that's the reason we sort of broke up. And that's probably the final reason why we broke up is because Paul took the offer with weddings parties, but we were well and truly down the road of, time to move on and to explore different things in every level. Archie went on to study for his degree in politics, and now he was, did a lot of work for World Vision and Action Aid, and Matt and I slowly got our degrees in teaching. But I battled on manfully for a little while longer after that before I went back. But you sort of know. And especially it's about relationships. If you're not enjoying each other's company, there's no point. If it's all about, just producing something because you feel like you need to, as opposed to this great camaraderie, then you've lost it, I reckon.
Yeah. But in there, you did put out a wonderful little gem of a record with Paul. Was it an EP or a mini album, Rob Knows Paul?
Oh, yeah. That was with my brother. He was working at Mushroom Records at the time, and we just did a little one. He just made his own little kind of label, which we put together, because I was starting to play along with some different songs, and I've been doing a lot of acoustic gigs with Paul, and then I did some with another guitarist, a guy called Phil Wales. And so that was at the end of that sort of process. So, we were sort of playing these. We had a residency at the Central Cobb Hotel every Tuesday night, and it was great. We had lots of people coming along on a cold, miserable Tuesday, and we sort of decided, we could turn that into a little record. So we did. So a couple of originals and a couple of our favourite covers.
Yeah, it's a fantastic record. There were no plans to continue on with that. I suppose with Paul's commitments to weddings parties, that was pretty much it.
Yeah. I was sort of, I think, well, that's right. He had sort of that sort of going on. So that was kind of just, in between that, after that EP that we made, sort of that kind of appeared then, and that was probably at the same time, that was sort of, he would sort of got the offer with Widow, so it was all the same time, and we were sort of, again, we were playing those gigs, and it's sort of a bit of between it was fun, and it was good to go back to just a really basic level of performance, just with two guitars and a bit of, that intimacy. But, it was sort of, time to, we were sort of, needing to kind of move on and probably, personality-wise, rubbing each other up the wrong way, and all of those sort of things. So it's just it's a rarefied atmosphere that you're living in when you're in a band and you're touring in a little Tarago tin box, and you're constantly in smaller hotel rooms if you're on that level. And it's you're in each other's pockets, and you naturally need to escape that environment after a while.
For sure. Now, you did reform the band a couple of times through the years. Was there any feeling of tentativeness on those occasions that you may not be able to recapture what you once had?
No, not really. I don't think so. I think it was more a case of, hey, it's funny how you can remember this stuff sometimes. and for my case, listening back, do I really have to remember those lyrics, those schoolboy lyrics that I wrote all those years ago? And so it was never any issue there. It was quite fun, and but we never wanted to kind of flog a dead horse with it. We're actually looking at doing another reforming again at the end of this year around some Melbourne Music Week if we can. And possibly re-releasing a CD of interviews, and maybe another CD just to be given away at the door.
Oh yeah.
So and a CD of perhaps the second. I know we did make the second CD, but I think that's out of stock. So maybe just sort of reproducing the second one again, and so, just having a few things for sale or as giveaways on the door. So we are looking at doing another gig at the end of the year, or possibly there was some talk of the Smithereens coming out, and that was another band who were on big time, and we played with them a lot, and I think they're coming out early next year now, and our name was mentioned to play with them, so that would be fantastic.
Cool. That'd be brilliant. Obviously with somebody else up front now, because sadly we lost Pat Denizio a year or two ago.
Yeah, which is interesting. Kind of like that they would decide to to do that, because to me that was such a feature of the band too. So and there you go. Yeah, so there's a possibility of that as well. So we'll see how we go. But definitely we are going to do another gig. Yeah,
that's great news.
In the future. It's been a fair while. So, and we never wanted to kind of turn it into something that kind of is this. We wanted to make special events every time we did it. We wanted to make sure that there was, we have a good crowd there, and to make it special. So, but I've had lots of people on the social media talking about, hey, when are you guys going to get back together? So, I say that we will be. It will be at the end of the year.
Brilliant. Oh, that's great. Now, you're teaching these days. Tell us how you got into teaching. Were you in the middle of those qualifications back in your band days?
I started as soon as I left school. My first year of school, I was studying a drama teaching degree at Broughton College out near Monash, next to Monash. Mm-hmm. And the first 2 years of that teaching degree was sort of a practical component. I was really into doing theatre stuff. Not musical theatre, straight theatre. But the band started to take, it started to really fire. So I kind of dropped out after halfway through my third year, especially when I was doing my teaching component. I wasn't really ready for teaching at that stage. And basically when we got the record deal with Big Time, we just said, and all of us kind of said, we'll give that a shot. I think Paul might have been studying at La Trobe, doing music at La Trobe. so yeah, we all basically decided to, to give it a go as a full-time thing. So, and then I came back to it after 12 years. I came back to my course and finished it. And I did a media degree alongside with it as well. And so basically I teach drama and media. And I like those ones because they're creative and I can use a lot of my kind of knowledge from sound creation. And I got very much into video editing and video making as well. So I use those skills that I learned from music quite a lot. But everyone asks me, so you're teaching music? And that, no. Rock and roll was, in the words of Dave Graney, rock and roll was where I hired. Yeah. There's no way I'd want to teach it. I can't even read it. Not properly anyway.
It's possibly a good thing.
Yeah. So I basically went back to the degree that I started. I'd sort of been flogging around with the Victory Girls and other solo things I was doing, and I made a little kind of record called The Craw with my compadre Phil Wales, who's always been beside me on those other journeys. So, and I was really happy with that record. And we got one song on the trailer for a film called Erskineville Kings, and we made a sort of a clip in the pub where the film was set with Hugh Jackman. So that was kind of fun. So
cool.
Did lots of bits and pieces there. Did a lot of music for theatre stuff. I was doing a lot of soundscape stuff and getting live musicians for various community theatre projects I was involved in. So I was always involved in that kind of music stuff in a different level, but I also did a lot more involvement of that in theatre as well.
Yeah.
So, but then it was time to get real and get some proper income for a change and support my poor little children in their life as well. So, yeah.
So how aware are your students of your rock and roll history?
It's strange because social media, a lot more people are picking up on it now. Like, I know social media's been, like with YouTube and things have been around a long time, but a lot of my younger students now are picking it up, and also from their parents who were kind of fans. And so at the very start, when I first came, there was an awareness then, but because some of the staff were sort of fans and things like that, because I was teaching a school in Geelong. And we did quite well in Geelong. But then there was a kind of a hiatus, so sort of, for about 10 years, I could sort of keep it under wraps. I never really mentioned it. But the kids, through their parents or whatever, have got, hi, Mr. Craw, you were in a band. You had long hair. Correct. How astute of you. So, so that sort of has been popping up more and more now, which is interesting. Yeah. And I remember Matthew showing me on YouTube once. I was looking on YouTube, and there was one of his students had gone on and said, "OMG, that's my Indonesian teacher." Oh my God, how embarrassed! Big OMGs in capital letters. That's quite funny. Yeah, but the school I teach at, I actually played there when the Creepers played there as part of a push. So it was weird when I went back to apply for a job there. I said, I recognise this place. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So looking back, if you had the time over again, is there anything you'd do differently which might have set the band down a more commercially successful path?
I probably wouldn't have worried about the commercially successful path. I would have probably been more I would have recorded as the essence of the band, really just sort of setting up in a live studio scenario, trying to capture that kind of energy and fun, second, and not worry so much about the intersections. I would have also treated it a bit more seriously like a trade. I would have probably set time to I reckon I should have sat down to spend time and treating songwriting as a bit more of a craft, to really kind of nut out a hell of a lot more songs and to throw away the ones that you think didn't really cut the mustard, rather than having a small number to pick from. So I would have treated it along those lines, and I wish I'd probably learned a little bit more about, studio craft as well, and engineering and things like that. So I wish I would have treated it as more of a songwriter's craft, and to really learn that side of it, because it's really interesting and it's fascinating. I think the more knowledge you can get through the process, the better it is for your own songwriting and for your own sort of, delivery. But I have got the chance to play with lots of different types of people, do lots of different things. I've played with, you know, David Bridie, with George Tellick's stuff before, recording on his album. I played for a long time, as sort of got a band together for Monique Brumby and played with her for a long time and recorded on her first album. So there's lots of little bits and pieces in between, which were quite fun. I got to sing backing vocals on Chris Wilson's The Long Weekend album on one or two songs. So bits and pieces, but that would be my thing. I would have treated it more like a craft.
Yeah.
And sort of recorded with that essence of what the band was originally intended to be, as you mentioned at the start of the interview, as a live band. Let's capture that energy and see how we go from there, you know, warts and all. And, I think you're wrong if you're trying to pursue a commercial aim. You just have to pursue what you want. You need to think about, is this the kind of song or the sounds that I would listen to and I would be proud of? And I think that's kind of where we sort of, the recording side, we fell into the trap of kind of listening to everyone else rather than our own inner thoughts of, you know, we know this is too far, too polished, too pushed, but we were too young and naive to really stand up for ourselves, I think. So, we were really young when we started too. So we had that on our side, but that was also against us.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, great to catch up with you. It's been a real treat. And one thing you should take great pride in, even though the band never really hit the heights of fame, it's nearly 30 years down the track and people still remember the band very fondly.
Yeah, it's good when we do have the Reform. The Reform gigs are like a great communal get-together with friends and fans, and it's really good fun. And, and there's a good crowd, and it's still always just it's a real hoot. We just have a ball. So, and I'm pretty sure the crowd does too. So, and for me, that's success. So,
we'll keep our fingers crossed that does all come together again later in the year. We'll look forward to seeing that.
Okay.
I'll let you get back to the surf. Good luck to the D's for the rest of the year, except on Anzac Eve. And
and howdy, Casey, and thanks for putting up with me.
No worries. Thanks again, Rob. Enjoy the rest of your holidays.
See ya.
Cheers.
Bye.